Thank you, Madam Chair. And Deputy Prime Minister, so you've said you do what you say. So can you tell us then, since the July elections, you've been in post now 12 months, how many planning permissions have been granted in the last 12 months for social homes, and how many of those social homes have started construction on site since you've been Deputy Prime Minister?
Well, I can't give you the granular detail of every single planning application, but what I can tell you is that we're monitoring what happens. I've done a number of call-ins. My department set up a specialist group that will help New Homes Accelerator. We are supporting councils with their negotiations on 106 notices to get more social and affordable homes as part of development. So we are looking at where the problems are with getting these houses and mixed tenure off the ground and are really pushing them. So we've already unlocked thousands of homes that the previous government wasn't able to deliver. But I can't give you the granite detail of every single planning application that we've had over 12 months.
You just said you were tracking it. So if you're tracking it, surely you should be able to say over the last 12 months we've granted planning permission for 10,000 houses and 4,000 have started on site. So you can't be tracking it if you haven't got those figures.
Is it worth me coming in here just to say, obviously we track overall planning permissions, but those are all granted at local level, so we can definitely look at kind of whether we can specify exactly how those break down between types of housing.
That's something you could probably write to us as a committee about.
I think it's probably worth saying, you know, even in a situation where considering all of the different reforms that we've put into place, we wouldn't necessarily expect to see those filtering through in those numbers quite yet. And I think that goes back to what the Chair said at the beginning about housing starts and the fact that housing starts are still lagging behind where we would want them to be. But that is because there is a considerable lead time between the time of making these policy changes and actually seeing both planning permissions and housing starts following through.
Planning permissions are up 6%. That is something that we've already seen between January and March of 2025. Planning applications were up 6% from the same quarter last year. So that is sort of like the first indication of dealing with what was an inheritance of housing and applications going off a cliff, basically, under the previous government, of some of the reforms we've introduced. Well, it is true. I mean, the statistics were really clear, and we're turning that around now, and we're starting to see that planning applications are going through. The planning infrastructure bill, which is still not, you know, it's still in Parliament at the moment. They have some good reforms in there that will help planning applications as well, and we'll get those starts. I've talked about the New Homes Accelerator, which we've unblocked thousands of homes that were stuck in the system. The issues around nutrient neutrality, the issues around making sure that the infrastructure like reservoir and water is there. These things were not even in the pipeline under the previous government, and we've started to grasp that nettle through the reforms that we're making, including telling local authorities we're bringing back mandatory housing targets, which the previous government didn't do. We'll start to make sure that there is a real important carrot and stick for people to say, we have to have these homes. And I think, in fairness, the government said this in opposition. We were elected on a mandate to do it, and people understand it. But going back to my previous point that I made before, and the tension, is that they gave me a mandate to build the houses, but they said quite categorically that they wanted input, and that's why mandatory housing targets are important, because then they have to consult on that with local people, but they want the infrastructure within that as well, and I think that's the big challenge, and that's what we're delivering.
In the planning and infrastructure bill makes infrastructure first, makes the roads come first, makes the doctors' surgeries come first, makes the schools come first, because I couldn't find it. So can you tell us, as Secretary of State, then, what in the planning and infrastructure bill makes infrastructure on development come first?
Well, first of all, the stuff, it's not the planning infrastructure. The infrastructure in the planning infrastructure bill is things like the nature recovery and dealing with things like nutrient neutrality and around streamlining planning. So planning applications, they can focus on the more contentious areas where you do need to then thrash out, as part of the planning process, the critical infrastructure that is needed. The role that we're playing across government through national infrastructure as well, and working with other departments, is about if there is a school or a hospital or roads. We're already investing in transport, significant amount of investment in transport that the previous government didn't do. And that is around making sure that if we're planning new towns, for example, or we're doing significant amounts of housing in an area, that infrastructure comes as part of that programme. Now, that takes time to do. I'm not going to have been able to do that in 12 months. You can appreciate that. But we're already doing that work, and we're already holding developers to account, which, again, the previous government didn't have a way of doing that, which at the moment people were frustrated that developers would come back after agreeing a programme of infrastructure and then say, well, we can't deliver that. And we're already now holding them to account to say, you've promised that as part of the development, we're going to make sure that happens, and we're supporting local authorities in making sure they do that. Because that's the buy-in that you'll get from the public with this. They know we need the houses, but they say we want to have a say in where they are, and we want to make sure the infrastructure is there as part of that. And I am absolutely clear on that mandate being caveated on those two conditions.